Hello, BookTube. Well, I hoped that more mail would come today, but never in my wildest dreams did I hope for this much cardboard. This little mail haul to end the rainy, overcast day ends in not one, not two, but 3 boxes. So we'll start off first with something very anomalous. This thing, clearly not sent from a publisher, and as light as a feather. So I don't really know what. I don't really know what this could be. Clearly sent from a person, not a publisher. What have we got here? What have we got here? Yes, see the, okay, well this could be odd. It's addressed to Open Letters Review, but the return address is, also the recipient address. So that's a little strange. I admit a small amount of foreboding, because the last anonymous piece of prose that I got, like in a circumstance like this, was that letter that so infuriated me that I actually made a video about it. So I'm hoping this is a card. Oh, but it's a nice card. Oh, very good. Oh, wonderful. Oh, that is wonderful. Your channel brightens my day. Okay, well, whoever you are, thank you very much. It's my goal to brighten your day, which is one of the reasons for yesterday. Yesterday I only made one video, and it was a sad video, and the reason for that is because I like to do this when I'm happy. I like you to see a smiling face. I like to imagine you're all smiling. I think we don't get enough of that, especially online. So that was the reason why there was only one video yesterday. So if my channel brightens your day, then that's wonderful. That's music to my ears. You should tell me that on a regular basis. So anyway, let's move on. That's a wonderful way to start a mail haul. Although the mail haul did have a negative side to it as well, which when the mailman was handing me the packages, he handed me one that was empty. There were going to be 4 boxes here. One of the boxes was empty. It had broken apart in shipping, and what the U.S. Postal Service does when that happens, I know it's meant with the best of intentions, but it almost adds insult to injury. They take the empty box and they put it in a plastic bag with a little label on it that says, "We tried," and they hand you the box and the bag. So I know that I was going to get one more book, and it's lost along the way. That's bittersweet. And because it's just a stamped box from a publisher, I have no way of knowing what was in it. But anyway, I still got plenty of stuff. It's bad enough to lose a book, but it's even worse to lose a box. But let's see, what have we got here next? This is from the great people at Princeton University Press. Comes out in June. Wow, that makes it my latest book. Definitely, this is my first June book. And what have we got here? It's by Russell Muirhead and Nancy Rosenblum, and it's called "A Lot of People Are Saying," with a subtitle, "The New Conspiracism and the Assault on Democracy." And of course, "a lot of people are saying" is a direct quote from the United States president, and the foremost person assaulting democracy in this book will by default be the President of the United States of America, who often prefaces, even now, and has been doing it for years, not just the time when he was running for president and now as president, he's been doing it for most of his life, where he will preface a bald-faced lie that he doesn't want pinned on him with the phrase, "a lot of people are saying," and then he'll just make something up. And if it's proven wrong, if it's proven to be a lie, then he has a perfect cover. He can just say, "Well, I heard that. I didn't say it myself. I was just relaying what I heard." And when he was running for president, and I remembered the weaselly, cowardly way that he has been using this phrase forever, I hoped that the U.S. press would immediately take the only right response, which is to constantly push, constantly do it. If he does it 10 times in one conversation, then do it, push back 10 times in one conversation. Who says that? Okay, but that's been proven wrong. Do you still say that? Okay, do you stand by that? All right, what about this sentence that you just said a lot of people are saying that's obviously wrong and provably wrong? Do you stand by it? You personally, do you stand by it? Do you stand by it? Do you stand by it? If the press had done that for the first 5 months of the 2015 campaign season, we would have a different president now. If they'd done that for the first 5 months of this presidency, we'd have a different presidency now. But anyway, I should get onto the pub sheet, shouldn't I? One of these days. Conspiracy theories are as old as politics. But conspiracists today have introduced something new. Conspiracy without theory. And the new conspiracism has moved from the fringes to the heart of government with the election of Donald Trump. A lot of people are saying Russell Muirhead and Nancy Rosenblum show how the new conspiracism differs from classic conspiracy theory, why so few officials speak truth to conspiracy, and what needs to be done to resist it. Classic conspiracy theory insists that things are not what they seem and gathers evidence, especially facts ominously withheld by official sources, to tease out secret machinations. The new conspiracism is different. There is no demand for evidence, no dots revealed to form a pattern, no close examination of shadowy plotters. Dispensing with burden of explanation, the new conspiracism imposes its own reality through repetition, exemplified by Trump's catchphrase, "a lot of people are saying," and bare assertion, as in the word rigged. The new conspiracism targets democratic foundations, political parties, and knowledge-producing institutions. It makes it more difficult to argue, persuade, negotiate, compromise, and even to disagree. Ultimately, it delegitimizes democracy, if it's allowed to go unchecked. It's the job of everybody to check it. Always, to check it. And I have seen a small, incremental, very hesitant uptick in that direction. The horrible alchemy that the whole process is being put to right now, the horrible just test of fire, is that news networks are learning that one of the ways to push back, the most effective way, the most ethical way, is to cut off oxygen to these new conspiracists, these theory-free conspiracists, the foremost example of which anywhere in the world is the President of the United States. And the best way to combat it is to cut its oxygen off. Don't repeat it. Don't throw a spotlight on it. Don't talk about it in any way, unless there's something to support it. If there's no fact at all, if it's contrary to fact, then don't do it. And news networks are learning that if they do that, their Trump audience goes away. Not just Trump supporters, but people who want to watch, to hear about this person in the Oval Office. And so they're faced with a horrible choice. We can either be ethical or we can be profitable. But one way or another, no matter what news networks intend to do, I have noticed a slight uptick in resistance to this kind of crapola. I have noticed a slight uptick where reporters will challenge Donald Trump. In the middle of a statement of his, they will challenge and say, okay, but what you just said is demonstrably not true. So why are you saying it? Do you have any evidence whatsoever? Okay, but alluding to a lot of people is not evidence. Do you have any evidence for what you're saying? I've noticed a willingness, a slightly increased willingness on the part of the press to do that. And like, for instance, I've often maintained, I maintained in 2015 when Trump was going after the press, and then in early 2016, after he was president, when he started calling the free press of the United States the enemy of the American people. It's the envy of the entire world, and he started calling it the enemy of the American people. And in addition to thinking, gee, how demoralizing that is, to have just naked autocratic talk coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States. In addition to that, I also thought, the press is a bad thing to have as your enemy in the long term. Unless you are willing to send troops into newsrooms and truncheon people, the press is a bad thing to have as an enemy. And I've noticed that gradually the press is starting to resist. They are starting to say, okay, well, in the week before the midterm elections, at no point before that, but in the week before the midterm elections, Donald Trump started talking about how we're going to put through a middle-class tax break. This won't be for rich people. This will be for the middle. Not the middle class, just the middle. We're going to do that. We're going to put that through. And I remember thinking, okay, Congress isn't in session, and it wouldn't get passed anyway, and everyone knows this. All the press is saying, left and right, is that this is just delusional. You're not a king. You don't have a parliament that is entirely composed of your toadies. You can't put through anything. This is just you lying to the voters so that in the preying on their short-term memory, so that in the last week before a midterm election in which you are very much on trial, they'll think, oh, well, he's promised me a tax cut. I'm in the middle. And the press fought back on that. And I noticed that there was a small amount of ideological neutrality in how they fought back. To the point where even official mouthpieces of the administration couldn't seem quite to find it in them to just repeat as if this was a thing that was going to happen. Even the state news agency, Fox, whatever you want to call it. I resist calling it Fox News. There's no news. But even they knew that you can't put through anything if Congress isn't in session. Trump does not get to decree a tax break, and a tax break wouldn't go through anyway with the deficit just ballooning. That's why I've mentioned on this channel that when Trump supporters, the handful of Trump supporters who remain, when Trump supporters say, well, you might not like how the guy talks, but we have the best economy of our lifetime. That's why I want to stop every person that tells me that. The other day it was a Lyft driver, and I just had to maintain a diplomatic silence because I didn't want him to drive me off a ditch. But I want to say to everybody that saying that the American economy is booming right now and cheering that is like jumping off the top of the Empire State Building and saying, after 1 second, boy, that person's moving really fast. That is really impressive. When what you should be looking at is 8 seconds from then. Not 1 second. 8 seconds. If you look at that person, they jump off the observation deck and you wait 1 second and then say, God, you are flying through the air. That is so impressive. Okay. If you wait 8 seconds, then you say, okay, that was a tragedy. And if you deregulate the financial industry, we already know how this story ends. We already know what the outcome will be. All we have to do is pray, just pray, that we survive it a second time. The world economy almost didn't survive the Great Recession of 2008. It almost didn't. And I don't think anybody who's not, really read up on the subject would even know what it would be like if the world economy collapsed. But anyway, who are these people? Since I'm talking all about them, do we know who they are? Do we have a biography of these two people? Russell Muirhead is the Roger Clements Professor of Democracy and Politics at Dartmouth College, and Nancy Rosenblum is the Senator Joseph Clark Research Professor of Ethics in Politics and Government at Harvard. Okay, well, we will see. we will see. A lot of people are saying. Okay, that could be hard to read, but I don't have to think about it. Good Lord, June. Can you imagine? The whole winter will be over. Who knows what else will be over? Another thing that will be old news by June will be the Mueller report. I don't agree with a lot of people who watch American politics these days who are saying that the sun rises and sets, the Earth's orbit tilts around the Mueller report. I don't see that at all. I don't think it's going to be the coming of some righteous Messiah like so many people do. I know what's going to happen. The Mueller report will detail in absolute flat black letter law, uncontrovertible fact, that there was knowing collaboration with Russian state agents to undermine the legitimacy of the 2016 presidential election in favor of Donald Trump, and that the Trump campaign and Trump himself personally knew about it and directed and coordinated it, which is 6 different kinds of illegal. That is a jailable offense. My strong inclination is to think that the Mueller report will say all that, and that it will either not be published, or it will be published and, mind-bogglingly, nothing will come of it. Nothing will actually happen as a result of it. So you'll have an independent counsel reporting that the president and his administration broke the law in order to become president, but nothing will happen as a result of it. And so I've been telling people for 2 years now, what do you actually expect to happen? The Capitol Police to walk into the Oval Office and handcuff the president? You want a firefight in the halls of the West Wing? I guess it will be interesting to see, but by June it will all be over. By June, who knows what? Can you even imagine what the world reality will be like in June? I can't. So we will revisit this book in June. But the problem is the same problem I have with a lot of Trump books, which is that they're invalid by the time their ink is dry. So, I mean, look at the news today. There's already another gigantic personnel upheaval that is being widely reported, widely rumored, and will almost certainly in some form or other happen. So that 2 or 3 of the major players in, for instance, Bob Woodward's book Fear will be out of a job in a month. and therefore, what do you make of that book if they're the ones who talk to him? It's a mess. Anyway, let's move on. We've got boxes to get to. That's your political homily for today. I don't even know what direction that political homily took. Except that I should repeat that it is really depressing, and it ought to be depressing even to the man's few remaining supporters. It ought to depress them that when a book talks about demagoguery and the new conspiracy theory thinking, the foremost exponent of all of that is going to be the President of the United States, who calls the press the enemy of the American people and floats a new conspiracy theory every day. That ought to be depressing to everybody. I mean, it's like I've been trying to say for 2 years now. There are lots and lots of really good ways to be Republican. You don't have to embrace this monster in order to be Republican. Anyway, okay, great. All right, well, we'll be firmly non-political for the rest of this little mail haul because this is the finished copy of something that we saw before. It struck me as really interesting, and I haven't got to it. I think it's a December title. Yeah, it is. It's an early December title. It's Ike's Mystery Man by Peter Schinkel. This is the finished copy of Ike's Mystery Man, which is about Robert Cutler, who was, the foremost aide to Eisenhower and who was gay. Was a deeply closeted gay man. Let's see here. In the summer of 2006, journalist Peter Schinkel first heard that his great-uncle Bobby, also known as Robert Cutler, had a secret that could have brought down the Eisenhower presidency. He was gay, at a time when gay people were barred from employment by the federal government. According to Schinkel's aunt, Patricia Cutler Warner, Bobby didn't bother to hide it when he wasn't at work. So in today's culture, he would have been found out in no time. And what would have happened then? Well, he'd have had to be fired. I'm not sure that it would have brought down the Eisenhower administration. I think that's a person who writes that in a pub sheet is probably unaware of how popular Eisenhower was. At work, he was the nation's first special assistant for national security affairs, now called the National Security Advisor, the closest confidant to the president's inner circle. The likes of George Bundy and Henry Kissinger and Brzezinski and Condoleezza Rice and Susan Rice, and 4 men since the start of the Trump presidency would later fill his shoes. Nice little dig there. Nice little dig there. Trump's had 4, and he hasn't liked or trusted any of them, and none of them have been able to make him sit still to listen to anything at all. But I'm getting political again. I won't do that. In this book, Schinkel reveals Cutler's full story for the first time and shows how valued he was by Eisenhower as a trusted friend and advisor on security and Cold War policy. And that's great. He's been in the shadows. It's I wish... I'll get to this. I haven't read much in the way of December. I am woefully behind. So this will just be a good reminder. And that is it. We had a wonderful card, and then we had a disastrous political rant, a lot of people are saying, and then we had a political book, but of another age, Ike's Mystery Man. And now we have boxes. So let's do boxes and have some fun. One fewer box than was delivered to me. But let's see. Do you want boxes, Baby Bean? So these will all be finished copies of probably December books. This first one is a finished copy of a December book. This is Airborne in 1943 by Kevin Wilson. This is Kevin Wilson did Blood and Tears, which you also saw on this channel. That's bound to happen, right? It's bound to happen if we keep doing mail hauls for years. It's bound to happen that we're going to follow many different books by the same author. I'm sure we saw this guy's last book in a mail haul somewhere 2 years ago or whatever. And we saw the advance copy of this as well. The year 1943 saw the beginnings of an unprecedented bombing campaign against Germany, which has been covered in a couple of other books this year as well. Over the next 12 months, tens of thousands of air crews flew across the North Sea to drop bombs on German cities. They were opposed not only by the full force of the Luftwaffe, but by a nightmare of flak, treacherously icy conditions, and constant mechanical malfunction. Most of these courageous crews were either shot down or killed or taken prisoner by an increasingly hostile enemy. This is the story of the everyday heroism of these crews in the days when it was widely believed the Allies could win the Second World War by air alone. American pilots had a special role in the Dam Busters campaign in particular. Even before the attacks on Pearl Harbor, scores of eager pilots traveled across the Canadian border to train with other future Dam Busters, all eager to take part. Authoritative and dramatic, Kevin Wilson's Airborne in 1943 brings these remarkable men and women to life. And it comes out in early December. And we've already had this year a couple of books on this subject. One was a major press, one was a specialty press. I read them both because I'm interested in all things World War II. In both cases, the moral turpitude of this bombing campaign was just not mentioned. It's just left out. I imagine from the sound of that, of the description of this book, it's going to be left out as well. And I guess you could say that maybe that's justified because it's not the kind of book that you're trying to write. If your goal as an author is to write a celebration, then maybe you will leave that out. But I'd be willing to bet that if you ask Kevin Wilson, are you a celebrator or are you a historian? He would say he's a historian. And it's not a historian's job to leave anything out. And so these brave men and women facing flak and freezing conditions and whatnot, and an increasingly hostile population, were embarked across the North Sea on missions to bomb civilian centers for demoralizing purposes. They were half or more of their designated targets were targets of no military value, where the goal was to kill women and children and the elderly, and to kill them in gruesome ways, to kill them in firestorms, which is... we'll have to see. I read the last one. I will read this one, and we'll see how full a portrait it is. Certainly the stories of the men and women are incredible anyway, even if you leave out the moral element, especially if you do. The stories are incredible anyway. So, necessary reading if somebody comes out with a big new book on the subject. I mean, you're not siding with the enemy to call these campaigns barbaric. There is no other word for them. Yes, it takes bravery to get into a plane and fly into that kind of resistance. But it also takes bravery to say to your commander, well, the mission that you've just described to me is blatantly immoral. It would be a war crime if war crimes existed, but it's certainly wrong, and I won't do it. And I'd be willing to bet, I know that there were pilots who did that, and I'd be willing to bet they won't even be mentioned in this book, much less described. So it's just, you're getting into that when you get a book like this. You have to take it all in all. So, boy, this is a contentious mail haul, isn't it? All right. Okay, great. All right, another finished copy from December. Fantastic. Okay, this is also right in the beginning of December. This is The Great War in America. Lovely finished copy with embossed letters and all. World War I and Its Aftermath by Garrett Peck. And Garrett Peck is young. I didn't know that in the advance copy, but he's young. And he's the author of 7 books. He's an American historian who serves as the advisory council for the Woodrow Wilson House in Washington, D.C. He's lectured at the Library of Congress, the National Archives, the National Museum of American History, and the Smithsonian Institution. And he lives in Arlington, Virginia. And this is his book about America in World War I. The Great War's bitter outcome left the experience largely overlooked and forgotten in American history. This book is a timely re-examination of America's first global experience as we commemorate World War I's centennial. The U.S. steered clear of the European conflagration for more than 2 years, but President Woodrow Wilson reluctantly led the divided country into the conflict with the goal of making the world safe for democracy. The country assumed a global role for the first time and attempted to build the foundations of world peace, only to have the experience go badly awry and retreat into isolationism. And I've had the advanced copy of this forever, and I haven't got to it. I have a familiar refrain. This is once again a product of the just flat out 2x4 to the face astonishment of the month of October. So I need to get to all of these, and I am now building momentum to get to all of these. So great. So we're dealing mostly with history. Is that right? Yeah, we've had 3 works of history and one nonfiction study of current day conspiracy theories. So that's all nonfiction so far. And then we have a bigger box than usual. So we'll see what this has. Of course, I'm curious as to what was in the box that I didn't get. But that's all right. Some of them are going to go wrong. Some of them are going to go right. At least I know. But I wonder if this will be another nonfiction for December. Oh, it is. Look at that. All right. It is. Okay, great. This is the finished copy of Ian Ballantyne's The Deadly Deep, a gigantic history of submarine warfare from the very beginning to the present day. Wow, okay. So Ian Ballantyne has covered naval and military issues for prestigious publications published on behalf of NATO and the Royal Navy. Oh, wow, okay. And he's published a bunch of books that were published in the UK. I don't think I've ever read Ian Ballantyne before. But this has been on my shelf, and I know I haven't got to it. I will. All of these things are on my weekly reading. And this is just soup to nuts. I mean, the pub sheet. Yeah, the pub sheet is very small because that's you know already what it is just to look at it. It's a soup to nuts history of submarine warfare, and that pretty much defines it. Let's see. The Deadly Deep is a fascinating and comprehensive account of how initially ineffective underwater boat, originally derided and loathed in equal measure, evolved into the most powerful and terrifying vessel ever invented, with enough destructive power to end all life on Earth. The author considers the key episodes of submarine warfare and vividly describes the stories of brave individuals who have risked their lives under the sea, often with fatal consequences. His analysis of underwater conflict begins with Archimedes discovering the principles of buoyancy. Probably moves on to Leonardo da Vinci, too, who imagined a prototypical submarine. Our clandestine journey then moves through the centuries and focuses on prolific characters with deathly motives, like David Bushnell, who devised the first combat submarine with the idea of attacking the British. Okay. All right, well, this also comes out in early December, so this is basically a shipment of for the same date. So we have an entirely nonfiction sweep, which is good because this is Nonfiction November, and you should all be reading nonfiction. And also this is almost an entirely guilty mail haul as well. I don't know what the missing box would have been. Probably another finished copy. There's only one of these books that is next year, and late next year, June. All the others of these are just horrifying reminders of how far behind I am, so I need to rectify that this week. So we have The Deadly Deep, a beautiful finished copy of a big, comprehensive history of submarine warfare. Then The Great War in America, another beautiful finished copy of America and World War I and the aftermath, what World War I did to the American psyche. Then Airborne in 1943 by Kevin Wilson, just a narrative history of the big push to attack Germany by air in the run-up to D-Day. Then Ike's Mystery Man, Secret Life of Robert Cutler, by someone who has access to his private materials and his private papers, and every single person who knew him is still alive. That's great. This kind of necessary book that if anybody else wants to write about Robert Cutler, they're going to have to use this book. And then lastly, a lot of people are saying a new book about conspiracism, about the new conspiracy thinking that does not require a theory. That's actually a very good way to put it. That plus a wonderful card saying thank you for this channel, which it's entirely my pleasure, believe you me. So now I'm gonna clean up this mess. Here, let me show you the mess maker. Ooh, look at those people, Frida. Ooh. Ooh. I have to clean up her mess now and also decongest, because this is, it's like I've heard from other booktubers. You're just fine. You're absolutely fine until you turn on the camera, and then all of a sudden you're burping, belching, and sniffling and sneezing. And then you turn off the camera and it all stops. So I don't know what that is. Good. For in my case, I probably have a good reason, which is that I'm opening all these packages. That's bound to irritate the old sinuses. But anyway, I'm going to clean up. But this will be your last tedious video for today. We will move on to tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.